President Trump announced he would not recertify the Iran nuclear deal and warned that the U.S. could withdraw from it at any time. Brendan Smilovsky of Getty Images. President Trump's Iran address creates uncertainty about the long-term survival of the two-year-old nuclear deal. It opens the door to Congress to find ways out of it, even as he threatened, yet again, to use his power as president to break the deal himself. But for now, the deal stands, with the administration itself acknowledging it's better to have it than to break it. Instead, the administration says it wants to redefine the U.S. relationship with Iran beyond the nuclear agreement. Trump reviewed Iran's missile tests and support for Hezbollah, Hamas and Iraqi militias that have targeted U.S. troops. Why the deal wins. For now, for all his denunciations of the deal, Trump's move Friday is another instance in which he has passed up a chance to break it. True, he didn't certify the deal again, as he has twice before under a recurring 90-day review stipulation. But that does not take the U.S. out of it. The certification isn't part of the deal. It's just a requirement Congress put on President Barack Obama to make him own a deal Congress didn't like. Trump's refusal to certify just puts the onus on Congress now to do something about it. And Trump isn't even asking Congress to take the U.S. out of the deal, as it could by imposing the sanctions that were lifted in exchange for Iran allowing limits on its nuclear program. It's useful to look at the reason Trump used for not recertifying the deal. Congress gives the president a menu of reasons. The president could have asserted that Iran is not in compliance. But we don't dispute that they're under technical compliance, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson told reporters Thursday, before the president made his announcement. Tillerson did say the requirements for complying aren't strong enough. Trump also could have said that the lifting of sanctions, part of the deal, was no longer vital to U.S. national security. But then how could he reasonably lift the sanctions again when they come up for regular renewal? Trump just waived some again last month, keeping the U.S. in the deal. In his speech Friday, Trump carefully stated that he refuses to certify the deal because he can't ensure that, using phrasing from Congress, the sanctions relief in the deal is appropriate and proportionate to what Iran gives on its end of the bargain. Even there, Trump could ask Congress to impose sanctions that would break the deal, but he is not. Instead, he is asking for new laws that would snap sanctions in place if Iran tries to ramp up its nuclear program. The administration has also called for the deal to be renegotiated. But on Thursday, Tillerson acknowledged that's unlikely, just as European allies who spent years working on the deal have stressed. What Iran gets. Trump's threats to eventually bring down the deal mean Iran can now blame the U.S. for shaking up an agreement that it is widely seen as complying with and is backed by Europe, Russia, China and the UN Security Council. As some backers of the deal worry, it's hardliners in Iran who'll benefit most because they will say the moderates were mistaken to make a deal that is about to fall apart because of a fickle and hostile United States. A member of the Iranian army walks past a mural in Tehran depicting the late Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini right on Friday. Getty Images. Meanwhile, Iran will continue to get its sanctions relief and do business with other signatories. The administration did impose new sanctions not covered by the deal Friday on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, a wing of Iran's military that trains and backs militias around the region. But the Revolutionary Guard is already heavily sanctioned by the U.S. European business roles-on European diplomats have been lining up to urge the Trump administration to stay in the deal. They're nervous that an anti-Iran current in Congress could eventually spoil the agreement. And they worry that if the U.S. exits the deal, it could try to punish the companies from Europe that are doing business with Iran. For now, they can go on developing things like aircraft, auto and oil deals with the Islamic Republic. And Trump's threats have drawn attention to the possibility that Europe and Iran could just continue with the deal and without the U.S. European countries have shown some more willingness to consider other actions to pressure Iran to rein in its hardliners. That could be because of Trump's threats to scrap the deal. Trump keeps the pressure on. Threats for future steps may have more impact than anything else Trump did on Iran this week. By staying in the deal, he keeps those threats alive. And that means Trump can continue to raise Iran as an issue, as he did throughout his campaign and since they PBS NewsHour Weekend. Good evening and thanks for joining us. California officials say this week's fast-moving wildfires in the northern part of the state have killed at least 35 people, making them the deadliest in state history. The fires have destroyed close to 6,000 structures and forced the evacuation of 100,000 residents. Today, more than 10,000 firefighters battled 16 large wildfires that have burned more than 214,000 acres. California wine country has sustained the worst property damage, especially in the Napa Valley and Sonoma County. Fires that are only 45% contained. NewsHour Weekend special correspondent Joanne Jennings went to the Sonoma hillside town of Kenwood, where most residents have evacuated, and others are scouring the ruins. Joanne Jennings, PBS NewsHour Weekend. Last Sunday night, Jim Perry went out for a night of dancing. He returned home exhausted and fell into a deep sleep. Jim Perry: I'm a sound sleeper. I just smelled smoke, a terrible burning smell. That's the only thing that woke me up. Jennings: by the time Perry awoke, all of his neighbors had evacuated, except one family. Perry: I did hear their son scream, the fire is coming in the back window, and that's all I heard. Jennings: that family got out, but Perry, a machinist, decided to stay to protect the home his father built. Perry: this whole field was on fire. Everything was on fire all at once all around me. Jennings: armed with several garden hoses, rakes, and a leaf blower, Perry stayed up all night fighting the raging fire. He snapped a few photos. Perry: things were exploding. All the propane tanks exploded. It was like a war zone. I cannot describe it. Jennings: you could have died. Why did you stay? Perry: because it's my house. Jennings: Perry's friend Jay Gamble steps in to comfort him. Jay Gamble: his dad built it. Perry: I just couldn't leave it. Jennings: this once tranquil cul-de-sac is hard to recognize for those who knew it well. It's now covered in ash, rubble, and the charred remains of vehicles. A stack of wheelchairs parked curbside in front of what was once a convalescent home. All 8 elderly residents were evacuated safely. Though Kenwood is inside a mandatory evacuation zone, a handful of residents remain to help. In this rural, mountainside town, Shelley Lewis and Zach Power spend their days caring for animals left behind by evacuees. Shelley Lewis: here, kitty, kitty. Jennings: their own home succumbed to the fires. Lewis: let's turn there. Jennings: but they don't want to dwell on what they've lost. Lewis: as soon as I was done crying, I was like, what can I do here, and so this far outweighs my loss. After a little coaxing, they got these cows to come out of hiding and eat. Lewis: the owner was really concerned about them. They haven't had food or water for a few days. Jennings: Lewis has received dozens of requests from residents who have fled in the middle of the night, leaving their animals behind. Louis: we are also the first eyes on the ground for individual homeowners like that. They're getting national news coverage of the general big picture, but they're like, what about my house? So we try to go to homes and send them back video and information. Jennings: at Kenwood Elementary School, a group of volunteers hastily clear brush and dried leaves from the building's perimeter. Doug Zucker is leading the effort. Doug Zucker: the fire department doesn't have any time for preventative work like this, but if we lose the school, that's the heart of the community. It's almost more important than our homes. Jennings: the fire station is a hub for the volunteers and firefighting crews from every part of California and neighboring states. Captain Fernando Calderon and his crew drove 7 hours from Long Beach and worked 40 hours on the fire line. Fernando Calderon: we've been working ever since, non-stop. Truly it's a statewide effort to put this fire out. There is still lots of fire and lots of tragic devastation. Its Chef Hugh Aitchison has a new book on slow cooking that he hopes will help get people cooking from scratch again. Bennett Ragling: Getty Images for NYCWFF. Hugh Aitchison's new book, The Chef and the Slow Cooker, doesn't show much cooking. Instead it shows the top chef judge reading in a lawn chair, taking a hot bath, or playing the cello, even though he admits he's about as musically inclined as a rock. It's about what you can cook while you do something else, even if that something else takes hours. That's because the acclaimed Canadian-born Southern chef is taking a good, hard look at that workhorse kitchen tool of convenience, the slow cooker. Aitchison's book contains 100 new recipes that feature some old favorites like brisket and pork shoulder, but also some new things, like poaching eggs, making ramen broth, and even creating jams and preserves. HSN talks to Weekend Edition Saturday host Scott Simon about his latest venture. This interview has been edited for length and clarity. So is the slow cooker an old technology whose time has come? It's been in your closet for years, gathering dust. Most people have one. They cooked a pot roast in it and put it away. But it is simple technology that really is a gateway to cooking from scratch again, which I think is the biggest hurdle that we have in households, getting people to cook from scratch, eating well and immersing themselves in good food. What does a slow cooker do that a pot on a stove doesn't? The pot on a stove is fine, but I want to keep the house intact and not burn it down. A slow cooker is just peace of mind. They're not very expensive, with usually just a low and a high setting, and a cover. And it acts as that braising pan, but in a safe and contained environment. And it doesn't just make everything taste mushy, no. You have more control. We've learned so much about food in the past 30 years, so much about technique and keeping things fresh. It doesn't have to be those slow cooker meals of yore. That's what the book's really trying to do, contemporize and make sure it's fresh and that it's savoring all these aspects of local cuisine that we can put into this pot and have it be really is something to relish. And you have recipes that are flavored from all over the world in this book. Yes, I think our palates have gone from a love of continental food to a love of the world now. Our palates really want to be wowed, and want to be pushed with spice and umami and different sensibilities. Even to the simplest pot roast you can add a really big flourish at the end of fermented chilies and chickpeas, things that show off the flavors of the world. Tell me about the recipe Chicken Country Captain. Chicken Country Captain really shows off the true Southern lineage. Southern food was brought here in the pockets of slaves. It was brought here in crazy, painful ways. But the spice ports of Charleston and Savannah had a lot of influence. So really, it's an elaborate curry chicken that really shows off the diversity of what was bringing in spices and Madeiras and ports. It was essential port locations in the South, mixed with the influence of West African cuisine and West Indian food, and this is a timeless recipe that comes out of it. So you have fig trees and you make jam in the slow cooker. Athens, Georgia, is like the preeminent fig climate. I planted a small fig tree years ago, not really thinking much about it, and now it's a magical producer of a gazillion figs. So we have to figure out something to do with them. A slow cooker is great for jam. The worst thing you can do with a jam is spend an arduous amount of time cleaning fruit, getting it together, getting it into a pot, and then torching and scorching the bottom of it because of an open flame and a little bit too high heat. The slow cooker really mellows that out. If you were going to buy a slow cooker, what should you look for? I really prefer a simple one. The insert pan is really important, so I look for one that's pretty heavy and has really good heat distribution. An aluminum thin one is not going to do much. So you just want something relatively heavy. Often they're porcelain or enameled, and those work well. What about all the free time you get with a slow cooker? I want you to cook from scratch for the beauty of sitting at the table later on with something you've created and